Level 1, where reality becomes non-local. Imagine you have two coins. Normal coins, the kind you flip to make decisions. Now imagine something strange. No matter how far apart you separate these coins, when you flip one and it lands on heads, the other instantly becomes tails. Not because of any signal passing between them, not because of any hidden mechanism you missed, but because they share something deeper than space itself. This is the essence of quantum entanglement, and it's not fiction, it's the bedrock of reality. In the early 20th century, physicists discovered that the universe operates on rules so bizarre that even Einstein refused to accept them. He called it spooky action at a distance, and he meant it as criticism. But the universe didn't care what Einstein thought. Here's where our story truly begins. In the quantum realm, particles don't have definite properties until you measure them. An electron doesn't spin clockwise or counterclockwise. It exists in both states simultaneously, in what physicists call superposition. It's like a coin spinning in the air, neither heads nor tails, but somehow both. Only when you catch it does it decide what it is. But entanglement takes this strangeness further. When two particles become entangled, they form a single quantum system. Measure one particle's spin, and you instantly know the other's spin, regardless of the distance between them. The moment you observe one particle and it chooses to spin up, its partner instantaneously chooses to spin down. Not because information traveled between them, but because they were never truly separate to begin with. This troubled Einstein deeply. In 1935, he and two colleagues, Podolsky and Rosen, published a thought experiment now known as the EPR paradox. They argued that if quantum mechanics were correct, you could know both the position and momentum of a particle with absolute certainty by measuring its entangled partner. This violated the uncertainty principle, so Einstein concluded that quantum mechanics must be incomplete. There had to be hidden variables, secret information determining everything in advance. For 30 years, this remained a philosophical debate. Then in 1964, a physicist named John Bell changed everything. He proved mathematically that if hidden variables existed, entangled particles would behave differently than quantum mechanics predicted. The correlations between their measurements would be limited in specific, calculable ways. Bell's theorem gave physicists something they desperately needed, a testable prediction. The experiments began in the 1970s and have continued with increasing sophistication ever since. Scientists create entangled photons, separate them by enormous distances, and measure their properties. Every single experiment has supported quantum mechanics and violated Bell's inequalities. The correlations are stronger than any local hidden variable theory could explain. The universe, it seems, is genuinely non-local. What does this mean? When we measure an entangled particle here, something about its partner changes there instantly. Not at light speed, not through any known force or field, but instantaneously across any distance. Yet this doesn't allow faster-than-light communication. The measurement results appear random on both ends until you compare notes through classical channels. It's as if the universe carefully maintains causality while simultaneously ignoring space. The mathematics describes this through something called the wave function. Before measurement, the two entangled particles share a single wave function spanning both locations. When you measure one particle, the wave function collapses everywhere simultaneously. The separation in space is, in a sense, illusory. At the quantum level, these particles remain intimately connected. This isn't just theoretical curiosity anymore. Entanglement has become the foundation of quantum information science. Quantum computers exploit entanglement to perform calculations impossible for classical machines. Quantum cryptography uses it to create unbreakable codes. When someone tries to intercept an entangled quantum message, they inevitably disturb the system, revealing their presence immediately. Scientists have now entangled not just pairs of photons, but entire clouds of atoms, complex molecules, and even microscopic diamonds. They've maintained entanglement across hundreds of kilometers and are working toward global quantum networks connecting satellites to ground stations. But the deepest mystery remains. What is entanglement really? The mathematics works perfectly, the predictions are confirmed, yet the mechanism remains obscure. Some physicists argue we should simply accept the equations and stop asking why. Others propose that space itself emerges from quantum entanglement, that distance is a secondary feature of reality, not a fundamental one. What we know for certain is this: the universe is not made of isolated independent pieces. At its most fundamental level, reality is a web of connections, a tapestry where pulling one thread instantly affects others regardless of distance. Particles separated by galaxies can remain part of a single unified system. This is where our journey begins, with the recognition that separateness might be the illusion, and connection the fundamental truth. As we move through each level, from atoms to consciousness itself, we'll see echoes of this quantum strangeness rippling outward, asking whether entanglement might be reality's deepest pattern. Level 2. When particles dance together, you've probably never thought of a water molecule as a quantum miracle, but that's exactly what it is. Every chemical bond holding those hydrogen atoms to oxygen, every interaction making water wet and life possible, emerges from quantum entanglement. Chemistry, it turns out, is applied quantum mechanics, and entanglement is the invisible architect of matter itself. Let's start simple. An atom consists of a nucleus surrounded by electrons, but these electrons don't orbit like planets around a sun. They exist in clouds of probability, regions where they're likely to be found. And here's the crucial part. These electrons are entangled with each other, and with the nucleus they surround. An atom isn't a collection of independent parts. It's a single quantum system where every component exists in relationship to all the others. When two atoms approach each other, something magical happens. Their electron clouds begin to overlap, and the electrons become entangled across both atoms. This entanglement is what we call a chemical bond. The electrons don't belong to individual atoms anymore. They belong to the molecule. They share wave functions, existing simultaneously around multiple nuclei, their fates intertwined in ways that determine the molecule's properties. Consider the simplest molecule, hydrogen gas. Two hydrogen atoms sharing two electrons. These electrons exist in what chemists call a bonding orbital, a quantum state that encompasses both nuclei. The electrons are entangled, their spins coordinated. When you measure one electron's properties, you gain instant information about its partner. This isn't metaphorical connection. It's the same quantum entanglement we discussed with separated photons, but now it's building the material world. The patterns get more complex as molecules grow larger. In benzene, a ring of 6 carbon atoms, electrons exist in delocalized clouds above and below the plane of the ring. These electrons are entangled across the entire structure, unable to be assigned to any single bond or atom. This quantum delocalization gives benzene its unusual stability and unique chemical properties. But entanglement in molecules does something even more remarkable. It enables quantum coherence, where multiple quantum states exist simultaneously and interfere with each other like overlapping waves. For decades, scientists assumed that this coherence was fragile, destroyed almost instantly by interactions with the environment. Molecules exist in the warm, chaotic world of room temperature and constant collisions. Surely quantum effects would vanish in such conditions. Yet nature found a way. In the process of photosynthesis, plants absorb sunlight and convert it to chemical energy with nearly perfect efficiency. For years, this efficiency puzzled scientists. How could plants transfer energy so effectively without losing it to heat? The answer, discovered through sophisticated laser experiments, involves quantum coherence. When a photon strikes a photosynthetic complex, It excites an electron that must travel through a maze of molecules to reach the reaction center. Classical physics suggests the energy would take a random walk, losing efficiency along the way. Instead, the excitation exists in multiple pathways simultaneously, a quantum superposition exploring all routes at once. Through quantum interference, the destructive paths cancel out while constructive paths reinforce, guiding the energy efficiently to its destination. This happens in ferns and algae at room temperature. In wet cellular environments that should destroy quantum effects immediately, the molecules involved are entangled during this energy transfer, maintaining their quantum relationship long enough to perform their function. The biological world has engineered quantum coherence to last hundreds of femtoseconds, far longer than physicists thought possible in such conditions. Enzymes, the molecular machines that drive chemical reactions in living cells, may also exploit quantum effects. Some reactions that enzymes catalyze require particles to tunnel through energy barriers, a purely quantum phenomenon where particles appear on the other side of obstacles they classically couldn't overcome. Recent evidence suggests that entanglement between the enzyme and its substrate might enhance this tunneling, making reactions proceed faster and more selectively. The distinction between quantum and classical chemistry becomes blurry at this scale. Classical chemistry uses quantum mechanics to calculate molecular properties, but treats most molecular dynamics as following classical physics. Yet increasingly, we're discovering that quantum effects persist in larger and warmer systems than expected. Molecules aren't just quantum objects that quickly become classical, they maintain quantum behavior in surprising contexts. This raises a profound question. Where does the quantum world end and the classical world begin? A single atom is undeniably quantum. A baseball is undeniably classical. But what about a protein with thousands of atoms? A virus, a cell? At what point does entanglement between particles stop mattering for the system's behavior? The answer seems to be it depends. Some systems lose quantum coherence nearly instantly through a process called decoherence, where interaction with the environment destroys quantum relationships. Other systems, carefully structured by evolution or engineering, can protect quantum effects even in hostile environments. Chemistry reveals that entanglement isn't confined to isolated laboratory experiments with individual particles. It's the foundation of molecular structure, the mechanism of chemical bonds, and potentially the secret behind life's most efficient processes. Every molecule is a quantum entity, and every chemical reaction involves the making and breaking of entangled states. As we look upward to more complex systems, the question becomes whether these molecular quantum effects can cascade into larger phenomena. Can the entanglement woven through molecular bonds influence the behavior of cells, organs, or organisms? Does chemistry's quantum web extend into biology's emergent complexity? That's where our journey takes us next. Level 3. Quantum effects in living systems life exist at the edge of chaos and order, in a regime where molecules are large enough to store information, but small enough that quantum effects still whisper through their operations. For most of the 20th century, biologists dismissed quantum mechanics as irrelevant to living systems. Life was wet, warm, and noisy, precisely the conditions that destroy quantum coherence. But life, it seems, didn't consult the textbooks. The first hints came from an unexpected place, the eyes of birds. Robins migrate thousands of miles with stunning accuracy, navigating using Earth's magnetic field. But Earth's magnetic field is incredibly weak, far too weak to affect ordinary chemical reactions. How could birds sense something so subtle? The answer appears to involve quantum entanglement occurring inside proteins in their eyes. Inside a bird's retina sits a protein called cryptochrome. When light strikes this protein, it creates a pair of entangled electrons called a radical pair. These electrons have correlated spins, linked by quantum entanglement. Here's where it gets fascinating. Earth's magnetic field, despite its weakness, can influence the spin states of these entangled electrons. The magnetic field doesn't need to be strong. It just needs to slightly bias the quantum probabilities. The radical pair exists in a superposition of spin states, and the magnetic field tilts the balance between them. This affects how long the entanglement persists before the electrons recombine. Different orientations relative to the magnetic field produce different chemical outcomes, which the bird's brain can detect. The bird literally sees the magnetic field as a pattern overlaid on its visual perception, like a heads-up display generated by quantum mechanics. This isn't theoretical speculation. Scientists have disrupted bird navigation using radio waves that interfere with radical pair mechanisms. They've measured quantum coherence in cryptochrome proteins lasting microseconds, an eternity in quantum terms, at biological temperatures. Evolution discovered quantum sensing long before human physicists did, but navigation is just the beginning. Consider smell, one of evolution's oldest senses. The traditional theory suggests that odor receptors recognize molecules by their shape, like locks recognizing keys. But this theory has problems. Molecules with identical shapes sometimes smell different, while molecules with different shapes sometimes smell identical. Something else must be happening. Enter the quantum vibration theory. Every molecule vibrates at specific frequencies determined by its bonds and structure. These vibrations are quantized. They come in discrete energy levels. When an odor molecule docks with a receptor, an electron might tunnel from one side of the receptor to the other, but only if the molecule's vibration matches the energy gap. The electron's journey through the receptor involves quantum tunneling, and the molecule's vibration acts as an energy bridge. This would explain why molecules with similar vibrations smell similar, even if their shapes differ. It would explain how receptors distinguish between molecules that differ only in their isotopes, which have identical shapes but different vibrational frequencies. The jury is still out, but experiments continue to suggest that your nose might be a quantum spectrometer. Then there's photosynthesis, which we touched on earlier, but deserves deeper examination. The quantum coherence observed in photosynthetic complexes isn't just a curiosity. It represents a fundamental challenge to our understanding of where quantum effects can survive. The environment inside a cell should destroy quantum coherence almost instantly through decoherence. Yet coherence persists, protected somehow by the protein scaffolding surrounding the light-harvesting molecules. Some researchers propose that the protein environment isn't just noise, it's carefully structured. Noise that actually protects quantum effects. The vibrations and fluctuations in the protein might correlate with quantum dynamics in ways that prevent complete decoherence. It's as if evolution engineered the environment to keep quantum effects alive just long enough to be useful. Even DNA, the molecule of inheritance, might have quantum features. Mutations sometimes occur when hydrogen atoms in DNA bases jump from one position to another, a process called tautomerization. This jump can happen through quantum tunneling, where the atom appears on the other side of an energy barrier without having enough energy to cross it classically. If tunneling contributes to mutation rates, then quantum mechanics directly influences evolution itself. Entanglement in biological systems isn't quite the same as the pristine entanglement between isolated photons in a laboratory. Biological entanglement is messy, short-lived, and embedded in complex, noisy environments. Yet it persists long enough to matter, to influence outcomes, to give evolution something to work with. The warm, wet, and noisy debate continues. Skeptics argue that most proposed quantum biological effects could be explained classically, that the evidence remains circumstantial, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. They're not wrong to be cautious. Science progresses through rigorous skepticism, but the evidence keeps accumulating. Quantum effects in photosynthesis are now firmly established. Radical pair mechanisms in bird navigation have strong experimental support. Quantum tunneling in enzymes appears in multiple systems. The question is shifting from whether quantum effects occur in biology to how widespread they are and how much they matter. Life occupies a unique position in the universe. It's complex enough to process information and maintain structure, yet small enough in its fundamental operations that quantum effects haven't completely washed out. Evolution had billions of years to explore the boundary between quantum and classical physics, to discover which quantum effects could be harnessed and protected. As we move to the next level, we'll explore whether quantum effects in individual molecules and proteins can scale up to influence the most complex biological system we know, the human brain. Can quantum entanglement in neurons affect consciousness itself? Or do we need a different kind of entanglement to explain how billions of neurons create a unified mind? Level 4. Electromagnetic fields and synchronized firing. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others through trillions of synapses. Yet somehow, from this incomprehensible complexity emerges a single unified experience. Right now, you're reading these words as one coherent stream of consciousness, not as billions of separate neural firing events. How does the brain bind all this activity into a singular you? This is the binding problem, and entanglement, though not quantum entanglement, might be part of the answer. Let's be clear from the start. When neuroscientists talk about neural entanglement, they usually don't mean quantum entanglement. The brain is far too warm and chaotic for delicate quantum states to survive in most neural processes. Instead, they mean something else: the way neurons become functionally coupled, their activities synchronized and correlated across vast distances in the brain, creating networks that behave as unified systems. Think of an orchestra. Each musician plays independently, yet they synchronize to create a coherent symphony. Similarly, neurons in different brain regions can synchronize their firing patterns, oscillating together at specific frequencies. When you see a red ball, neurons processing color information in one brain area synchronize with neurons processing shape information in another area, and with neurons processing motion in yet another. This synchronization binds separate features into a single perceptual object. These synchronized oscillations occur at various frequencies, from slow delta waves during deep sleep to rapid gamma oscillations during focused attention. Gamma oscillations, around 40 cycles per second, are particularly intriguing. They correlate strongly with conscious awareness. When neurons fire in gamma synchrony, they're more likely to influence other neurons, to participate in the current moment of consciousness. Disrupted gamma synchrony appears in disorders like schizophrenia and autism, suggesting that proper synchronization is essential for normal conscious experience. But how do neurons separated by centimeters synchronize without direct connections? Electrical signals travel through neural pathways. Yes, but some synchronization happens too quickly to be explained by synaptic transmission alone. This is where electromagnetic field theories enter the picture. Every neuron firing generates a tiny electric field. Billions of neurons firing together generate measurable electromagnetic fields that permeate the entire brain. These fields can be detected from outside the skull. That's what electroencephalography measures. But fields don't just passively reflect neural activity. They can influence it. Electromagnetic fields can affect the firing probability of nearby neurons, nudging them towards synchronization. This creates a feedback loop. Synchronized neurons generate stronger, more coherent fields. These fields then promote further synchronization. The brain's electromagnetic field becomes both a consequence of neural activity and an influence upon it. Some researchers propose that this field acts as a binding mechanism, a way for widely distributed neural activity to achieve global coordination. The controversial question is whether this field plays a causal role in consciousness. Does the electromagnetic field actually contribute to your subjective experience, Or is it merely an epiphenomenon, a byproduct with no functional significance? Some neuroscientists argue that consciousness emerges from field dynamics that integrate information across the entire brain. Others dismiss this as unnecessary metaphysics, arguing that synaptic connections suffice to explain everything. Now, there's another level to consider. Might genuine quantum entanglement play a role in the brain? This is where we enter highly speculative territory. The Penrose-Hameroff theory proposes that quantum coherence occurs inside microtubules, structural proteins that form the skeleton of neurons. They suggest that entangled quantum states in these microtubules could explain aspects of consciousness that seem difficult to explain classically, particularly the unity of conscious experience and the existence of subjective awareness itself. According to this theory, microtubules maintain quantum coherence through a process called objective reduction, where quantum superpositions collapse not through environmental decoherence, but through quantum gravitational effects. This collapse, they argue, corresponds to moments of conscious experience, creating the discrete frames of consciousness we experience as continuous. The theory is highly controversial. Most neuroscientists consider the brain too warm and wet for significant quantum coherence. Decoherence times would be far too short, measured in femtoseconds rather than the milliseconds needed for neural processing. The theory makes predictions that are difficult to test and relies on physics that remains unproven, yet dismissing it entirely might be premature. We've already seen that biology can protect quantum effects in surprising ways. Photosynthesis maintains coherence at room temperature. Who's to say evolution couldn't have found ways to extend coherence in neural structures? Some researchers are developing experiments to test whether anesthetics work by disrupting quantum processes in microtubules. As Penrose and Hameroff predict, whether quantum or classical, neural entanglement in the sense of correlated, synchronized activity is undeniably real and important. Your brain doesn't process information in isolated modules. Instead, information flows and integrates across distributed networks. Neurons in your visual cortex entangle informationally with neurons in your motor cortex, your memory systems, your emotional centers. They form temporary coalitions, synchronized assemblies that dissolve and reform millisecond by millisecond. This functional connectivity creates what neuroscientists call the brain's connectome, not just the anatomical wiring diagram, but the dynamic patterns of correlation and synchronization that change with every thought and perception. Your brain is constantly reorganizing itself, creating new patterns of entanglement between neural populations. The binding problem remains unsolved, but we're getting closer. Consciousness emerges not from any single neuron or region, but from the pattern of relationships, the synchronized dance of billions of neurons creating a unified field of activity. Whether that field is purely classical or has quantum components, whether electromagnetic fields play a causal role or merely reflect underlying synaptic dynamics, the central insight remains. The brain achieves unity through entanglement. As we move beyond the individual brain, we'll see that entanglement extends further still. Brains don't exist in isolation. They connect with other brains through behavior, communication, and shared experience. The entanglement patterns we've explored within a single nervous system might scale up to networks of minds, creating forms of connection that transcend individual skulls. Level 5. The invisible threads between people. You're sitting across from someone you love, and before they speak, you know something's wrong. Their posture, the tightness around their eyes, the rhythm of their breathing. Your brain processes these cues below conscious awareness and generates an intuition. But it's more than observation. Your own physiology begins to mirror theirs. Your heart rate adjusts, your breathing synchronizes, your emotional state shifts to match. This is psychological entanglement, and it's wired into our biology. We are profoundly social creatures. shaped by millions of years of evolution in tight-knit groups where survival depended on coordination and cooperation. Our brains didn't evolve to be isolated information processors. They evolved to connect with other brains, to predict and influence them, to create shared experiences that transcend individual minds. This connection operates through mechanisms that create something remarkably similar to entanglement, not quantum, but relational. The foundation lies in mirror neurons, discovered accidentally in the early 1990s, when researchers noticed that neurons in a monkey's brain fired both when the monkey performed an action and when it watched another monkey perform the same action. The observer's brain was internally simulating the observed action, creating a neural resonance between minds. Humans have extensive mirror systems. When you watch someone grasp a cup, neurons in your motor cortex activate as if you were grasping it yourself. When you see someone in pain, your pain networks activate, creating an embodied understanding of their experience. You don't just intellectually process that they're hurting, you feel an echo of their pain in your own neural architecture. This mirroring creates a form of entanglement between nervous systems. Your internal states become correlated with others' states, not through any mystical connection, but through rapid, automatic simulation. You can't help but resonate with the people around you. Their emotions become partially your emotions, their intentions partially visible in your own motor planning. This is why emotions are contagious. Enter a room full of anxious people, and your own anxiety rises even if you don't know why everyone's worried. Spend time with someone depressed, and your own mood darkens. Conversely, laughter spreads through groups like wildfire, and enthusiasm breeds enthusiasm. We're constantly broadcasting our internal states and receiving others' broadcasts, creating webs of emotional correlation. The entanglement deepens through physiological synchrony. When people engage in meaningful conversation, their heartbeats begin to synchronize. Their breathing falls into rhythm. Even their neural activity shows correlated patterns. Brain scanners reveal that during deep communication, similar regions activate in both speaker and listener, creating a neural coupling that transcends individual brains. Parents and infants show remarkable synchronization. A mother's heartbeat affects her baby's heart rate. Their movements coordinate. Their attention synchronizes, with the infant following the mother's gaze and the mother instinctively tracking the infant's focus. This early synchrony forms the foundation for attachment, the deep bond that shapes emotional development. Attachment theory describes how early relationships create internal working models, mental frameworks that shape how we relate to others throughout life. But these aren't just cognitive schemas. They're embodied patterns of expectation and response. When your attachment system activates, it generates predictions about how others will respond. And these predictions shape your behavior in ways that often elicit confirming responses. You become entangled with others through self-fulfilling prophecies of connection or disconnection. Therapeutic relationships demonstrate psychological entanglement powerfully. A skilled therapist doesn't just listen intellectually. They attune to the client's emotional state, allowing their own nervous system to resonate with the client's experience. This attunement creates a sense of being understood that transcends words. The therapist's regulated nervous system can help regulate the client's dysregulated system through this resonance. Providing a corrective emotional experience, groups develop their own forms of entanglement. Teams working closely together begin to think alike, developing shared mental models and coordinated work rhythms. They finish each other's sentences, anticipate each other's needs, and achieve coordination that far exceeds what explicit communication could provide. Jazz musicians improvising together, surgeons operating as a team, athletes moving in coordinated plays, all demonstrate emergent synchronization that makes the group function as a unified system. But psychological entanglement has a shadow side. We can become entangled with others in unhealthy ways, losing our own emotional boundaries and autonomy. Codependent relationships involve excessive entanglement. where each person's emotional state depends too heavily on the others. Enmeshed, families show blurred boundaries, where individual identities struggle to develop. Healthy relationships require a balance, enough entanglement to create genuine connection, enough independence to maintain separate selves. Culture itself represents a form of collective entanglement. Shared beliefs, values, and narratives create correlated thinking across millions of minds. People raised in the same culture develop similar automatic associations, emotional responses, and behavioral patterns. These aren't just learned beliefs we could easily discard. They're deeply embodied patterns woven through our neural architecture. The mechanisms underlying psychological entanglement are entirely classical. No quantum effects need be invoked. Yet the phenomenon itself, the way minds become correlated, the way your internal state depends on and influences others' states, creates something functionally analogous to entanglement. Measure one person's emotional state, and you gain information about their partner's state. Change one person's behavior, and the other's behavior shifts in response. We exist not as isolated minds, but as nodes in networks of relationship. Your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors emerge not just from your individual brain, but from your entire social context. Who you are depends fundamentally on whom you're connected to. The boundaries we imagine between self and other are more permeable than we typically recognize. This raises a profound question. If individual minds are so deeply entangled with other minds, what happens at larger scales? Can entire societies display forms of collective behavior that transcend individual intentions? Can groups develop emergent properties that no individual member possesses? As we zoom out further, we'll explore how psychological entanglement scales up to social entanglement, creating phenomena that shape history itself. Level 6. How societies move as one on. A quiet Tuesday afternoon, a teenager posts a video online. Within hours, millions have watched it. Within days, it's reshaped public discourse. Within weeks, policy has changed. No central authority coordinated this response. No single person intended these consequences. Yet somehow, a society of billions moved in concert, displaying patterns of collective behavior that no individual planned. This is social entanglement, the emergence of large-scale order from millions of interconnected decisions. Societies are complex systems, webs of relationship and influence, where individual actions cascade through networks in unpredictable ways. Each person responds to the people they're connected to, who respond to their connections, creating feedback loops that amplify some behaviors and suppress others. Small perturbations can explode into massive changes, while seemingly major events can vanish without impact. The system is neither fully ordered nor fully chaotic. It exists at a critical point where both stability and transformation are possible. Consider how fashion trends spread. Someone influential adopts a new style. Their followers notice and some adopt it themselves. Their followers notice and a cascade begins. But not all cascades succeed. Most attempts at starting trends fail immediately. The network's structure, who's connected to whom, who influences whom, determines which innovations spread and which die out. The trend doesn't exist in any individual mind. It exists in the pattern of adoption across the network. This is emergence, the appearance of collective phenomena that can't be understood by examining individuals alone. A single bird doesn't create a murmuration. The stunning, coordinated flight of thousands moving as one fluid shape. Each bird follows simple rules. Maintain distance from neighbors, match their velocity, move toward the group's center. Yet from these local interactions emerges breathtaking global coordination, a superorganism that appears to have its own intentions and intelligence. Human societies display similar emergence. Markets don't have minds, yet they process information and coordinate economic activity across billions of transactions. Cities don't have central brains, yet they self-organize into neighborhoods, traffic patterns, and distinctive cultures. Languages evolve without any committee deciding how words should change. Culture shifts without any single person directing the transformation. Information cascades represent one of the most powerful forms of social entanglement. When people make decisions based on observing others' decisions rather than on independent information, cascades can occur where everyone follows the same path regardless of whether it's optimal. Imagine a street with two restaurants. The first person randomly chooses one. The second person, seeing someone in that restaurant, assumes it must be good and chooses it too. The third person sees two people and becomes even more confident. Soon everyone's in one restaurant, even though the food might be worse. The later diner's decisions are entangled with earlier diner's decisions through informational correlation. Financial markets exhibit this dramatically. Stock prices reflect not just companies' fundamental value, but also investors' beliefs about what other investors believe. This creates reflexive feedback loops where rising prices attract buyers, which drives prices higher, attracting more buyers until the bubble pops. The crash happens because everyone simultaneously realizes that everyone else realizes that prices are unsustainable. Individual decisions are so tightly entangled through mutual awareness that the market moves as a single entity. Network effects create another form of social entanglement. The value of being on a social platform depends on how many others are on it. This creates a coordination problem. The platform is only valuable if everyone uses it, but no one will use it unless everyone's already there. Once a platform achieves critical mass, network effects create lock-in, making it nearly impossible for competitors to displace it. The users are entangled through interdependent utility. Each person's benefit depends on all the others' choices. Mass movements demonstrate social entanglement at its most dramatic. Revolutions can simmer for years before suddenly exploding when a critical mass realizes that a critical mass is willing to act. The individual decision to protest depends on how many others you think will protest. Everyone waits, watching everyone else, until some catalyst reveals that many are willing to act. Then the dam breaks and the crowd surges, displaying collective power that shocks even participants. The movement isn't in any individual. It's in the network structure and the sudden alignment of millions of mutually dependent decisions, memes, ideas that spread through cultural transmission, represent information patterns, replicating through the network of minds. Successful memes possess features making them likely to be remembered and shared. Emotional resonance, simplicity, adaptability to different contexts. They evolve through variation and selection, just like genes, competing for the limited resource of human attention. Your beliefs and values are partially composed of memes that happen to successfully replicate through history's social networks to reach your mind. The digital age has transformed social entanglement. Traditional societies had local, sparse networks. You interacted mainly with geographic neighbors. Information spread slowly, giving communities time to integrate changes. Now networks are global and dense. Everyone is connected to everyone through a few degrees of separation. Information spreads at light speed. A video filmed anywhere can be viewed everywhere within hours. This hyperconnectivity creates unprecedented coordination possibilities. Movements organized globally overnight. Crowdfunding allows millions to contribute tiny amounts to projects that would have been impossible before. Collective problem-solving tackles challenges too large for any individual or organization. Wikipedia represents millions of contributors, creating a knowledge base that no central authority could have produced. But hyperconnectivity also creates unprecedented vulnerability. Misinformation spreads as rapidly as truth, and emotional, outrage-inducing content spreads faster than careful, nuanced content. Filter bubbles emerge where algorithms cluster like-minded people, creating echo chambers that amplify extreme views. Society fragments into tribes with incompatible realities, each consuming different information streams and developing different beliefs about basic facts. Social entanglement at this scale creates something resembling collective intelligence, but also collective stupidity. The crowd can be wise. Prediction markets and average judgments often outperform experts. But the crowd can also be mad. Moral panics, conspiracy theories, and destructive movements emerge from the same network dynamics that create beneficial coordination. We're nodes in a global nervous system that's increasingly interconnected, yet increasingly fragmented. Our individual thoughts and actions ripple through networks in ways we can't predict or control. We influence and are influenced by people we'll never meet, through chains of causation too complex to trace. The question becomes, as social entanglement intensifies, what emergent phenomena will arise? Are we creating collective superintelligence, collective chaos, or both? This brings us to our final level, where we must confront the ultimate question: is the entire universe entangled as a unified system? And if so, what does that mean for consciousness, meaning, and our place in reality? Level 7. The ultimate interconnection. Stand outside on a clear night and look up at the stars. The photons entering your eyes left those stars years, centuries, even millennia ago. They've traveled across incomprehensible distances, yet they arrive perfectly to paint a picture on your retina. In that moment, your consciousness connects with ancient nuclear furnaces billions of miles away, but the connection runs deeper than photons. According to some interpretations of physics, the entire universe might be a single, unified, entangled system, and your observation of those distant stars might be fundamentally woven into their existence. We've journeyed through 6 levels of entanglement, from quantum particles to societies. Now, we must confront the most profound possibility, that everything, every particle, every field, every mind is part of one cosmic entanglement that encompasses reality itself. This isn't mysticism. It emerges from taking quantum mechanics seriously. Return to quantum entanglement's core insight. Particles that have interacted become correlated in ways that transcend space. They share a wave function regardless of separation. Now consider this. In the earliest moments after the Big Bang, the entire universe was compressed into a space smaller than an atom. Every particle that exists today was in direct contact, interacting intensely. Those particles then flew apart to create galaxies, stars, planets, and eventually you. But according to quantum mechanics, those particles never truly separated. They remain entangled, their wave functions correlated across cosmic distances. The universe, in principle, is described by a single wave function, the universal wave function, that encompasses everything. Every particle that exists is quantum mechanically entangled with every other particle it has ever interacted with, which ultimately means entangled with everything. This leads to remarkable implications. The holographic principle, emerging from studies of black holes and quantum gravity, suggests that all information contained in a volume of space can be encoded on the boundary of that region. It's as if three-dimensional reality is a projection from a two-dimensional surface, like a hologram. This implies that the universe is fundamentally unified. What appears as separation is an illusion emerging from deeper connections. String theory and quantum gravity theories suggest that space itself might emerge from entanglement. At the deepest level, there might be no space, no distance, just quantum information in entangled states. The geometry of space-time, the stage on which physics plays out, could be a secondary phenomenon arising from patterns of entanglement. In this view, separation is derivative, connection is fundamental. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics pushes this further. When a quantum measurement occurs, instead of the wave function collapsing to one outcome, the universe splits into multiple branches. one for each possible outcome. All outcomes occur, but in different universes, and all these universes remain quantum mechanically entangled. They share a universal wave function that encompasses all possibilities, all branches, all versions of reality. This sounds like science fiction, yet it's a mathematically consistent interpretation of quantum mechanics that avoids the measurement problem by denying that wave function collapse occurs at all. The theory predicts exactly what we observe, while suggesting that reality is vastly larger and stranger than the single universe we experience. Every quantum event spawns new branches, creating an ever-expanding multiverse of entangled possibilities. Now we must confront consciousness. Throughout this journey, we've moved from inanimate entanglement toward mind, but we've treated consciousness mostly as an emergent phenomenon, arising from but separate from the physical substrate. What if that's wrong? What if consciousness plays a fundamental role in the universe's structure? The participatory universe hypothesis suggests that observation isn't passive but active, that conscious observation literally shapes reality. In quantum mechanics, measurement changes the system being measured. The observer cannot be separated from the observed. They form a unified, entangled whole. Some physicists propose that consciousness is what collapses the wave function, selecting which possibility becomes actual from the quantum superposition of potential states. This doesn't mean your mind creates reality through wishful thinking, but it suggests that consciousness might be built into the universe's fabric rather than being an accidental byproduct. The universe might require observers to become definite, to crystallize from quantum possibility into classical actuality. In this view, mind and matter are two aspects of a unified cosmic system, each incomplete without the other. This touches on ancient philosophical questions: monism versus dualism, idealism versus materialism. Is reality fundamentally mental or physical? Or is this distinction itself misguided, arising from incomplete understanding? If the universe is a unified, entangled system and consciousness is part of that system, then perhaps mind and matter aren't separate categories but different aspects of one underlying reality. The hard problem of consciousness, explaining how subjective experience arises from physical processes, might require rethinking the relationship between physics and experience. If consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, if it's woven into reality at the quantum level rather than appearing mysteriously from neural complexity, then perhaps experience and physics are two perspectives on the same unified system. We're left with more questions than answers. Is the universe conscious? Does cosmic entanglement imply cosmic mind? Or is consciousness still localized in complex systems like brains, despite being embedded in a fundamentally unified universe? These questions transcend current science, entering territory where physics meets philosophy meets spirituality. What we can say is this: the universe is far more interconnected than everyday experience suggests. From quantum particles to human societies, patterns of entanglement create unity within diversity. Separation is partial, contextual, approximate. At every level, from the smallest to the largest, reality displays both individuality and interconnection, both independence and entanglement. You are a collection of quantum particles that were forged in ancient stars, each entangled with the cosmos. You are a biological system, exploiting quantum effects to sense and navigate the world. You are a brain synchronizing billions of neurons into unified consciousness. You are a person entangled with other minds through relationship and culture. You are a node in global networks reshaping society. And you are ultimately part of the universe observing itself. Matter become conscious, the cosmos awakening to its own existence. The journey through every level of entanglement reveals a profound truth. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is relationship, connection, entanglement. The boundaries we draw between particles, between molecules, between organisms, between minds, between self and universe are convenient fictions, useful for navigation, but not ultimately real. At the deepest level, perhaps we are not separate beings in a universe of things, but patterns of organization in a unified cosmic system, waves in an infinite ocean, temporarily distinct, yet always fundamentally one.